The phone call that changed everything. My name is Ava Mitchell, and until last winter, I believed family meant safety. I was 32 years old, living in Seattle, Washington, working 60 hours a week as a pediatric nurse while trying to build some kind of stable future after years of struggling financially. My life was not glamorous. I rented a small apartment with thin walls and broken heating, drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic with one door that only opened from the inside, and spent most nights eating microwave dinners while charting patient notes from home. But despite all that, I was proud of myself, because everything I had, I earned. I worked double shifts. I skipped vacations. I missed birthdays. I sacrificed relationships. And I did all of it for one reason: my mother. When my father died from a heart attack 6 years earlier, my mother completely fell apart. She had never handled bills before. She had never worked full-time. My father took care of everything while she stayed home and raised me. After his death, I became her support system, emotionally, financially, mentally. At first, it felt natural. She was my mom. I loved her. I paid her rent when she fell behind. I covered her medical insurance. I sent grocery money every month. I even helped refinance her home in Portland so she would not lose it. And because I trusted her completely, I agreed to put my name on the mortgage paperwork. That decision almost destroyed my life. The call happened on a Thursday evening. I had just finished a 14-hour shift in the pediatric ICU. One of our patients, a little 7-year-old girl named Lily, had coded twice that day. I still remember the feeling of her tiny hand wrapped around my finger while doctors rushed around the room. By the time I got home, my scrubs smelled like antiseptic and exhaustion. I dropped my bag near the couch and microwaved leftover pasta while staring blankly at the TV. Then my phone rang. Mom. I smiled automatically before answering. "Hey, Mom." Her voice sounded strangely cheerful. "Ava, sweetheart, I need to tell you something exciting." I remember laughing softly. "Please tell me you finally booked that Florida trip." "Oh, it's better than that." Something about her tone made my stomach tighten. "What happened?" There was a pause. Then she said the sentence that split my life into before and after. "I sold the house." At first, I thought I misheard her. "What?" "I sold the house," she repeated casually. "The market was perfect. I got an amazing offer." I stood up so fast my chair scraped across the floor. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "The Portland house, honey." I could barely breathe. "That house is under both our names." "Yes, technically." Technically, that word. Even now, I hate that word. I walked toward my kitchen counter slowly, gripping the edge hard enough for my fingers to hurt. "When were you planning to tell me this?" "I'm telling you now." "No," I said quietly. "You're telling me after it happened." She sighed dramatically. "Ava, please don't make this difficult." Difficult. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. "Mom, where are you going?" Another pause. Then she laughed, actually laughed. "Well, Gary and I are moving to Arizona." Gary, her boyfriend, the same man she had known for less than a year. The same man who never had stable employment. The same man who once asked me if I had access to my father's retirement accounts. I felt cold all over. "You sold the house because of Gary." "Oh, sweetheart, don't sound judgmental." I closed my eyes. "Mom, how much did you sell it for?" $820,000. My knees nearly gave out. The house had increased massively in value. And because my name was attached to the mortgage refinance, I immediately realized something horrifying. Taxes, liability, legal exposure. Where is the money? We already transferred it. We. Not she, we. I swallowed hard. "Mom, tell me you didn't put the money into a shared account with Gary." Silence. That silence told me everything. I sat down slowly. "Please tell me you didn't do that." "Ava, you worry too much." I started shaking. "You put $800,000 into an account with a man you've known 11 months. He loves me." I laughed once, not because anything was funny. Because I suddenly realized how impossible this conversation was. Then she said the sentence I will never forget. "You always act like you're smarter than everyone else." That hurt more than it should have, Because I had spent my entire adult life trying to save her. I paid her bills quietly. I fixed her mistakes quietly. I protected her quietly. And somehow I had become the villain. I asked one final question. When exactly did the sale close? Yesterday. Yesterday. Meaning every document was already signed. Every transfer completed. Every decision finalized. Without me. I ended the call without saying goodbye. Then I sat alone in my apartment staring at the wall while panic spread through my chest. I wish I could tell you I handled it calmly. I didn't. I cried. Hard. Not because of the money. Because of betrayal. Because the person I trusted most had made a life-changing decision behind my back while still expecting me to support her emotionally afterward. That night, I barely slept. At 3:17 a.m., I opened my laptop and started searching legal articles about co-owned property sales. By sunrise, I realized something terrifying. My mother had forged my electronic consent signature. And suddenly, this was no longer just family drama. It was fraud. The next morning, I called out sick for the first time in almost 2 years. My supervisor sounded shocked. Ava, are you okay? I almost said yes automatically. Instead, I told the truth. No! Then I spent the next 6 hours collecting documents, mortgage paperwork, property records, email confirmations, tax forms, electronic signatures. Every file made the situation worse. The deeper I looked, the more obvious it became that my mother had intentionally excluded me. The property sale notifications had been redirected to her email. The closing documents used a digital signature timestamp from Portland, while I had been physically working in Seattle. And somehow someone had approved legal consent on my behalf. I felt sick. Not angry yet, not fully, just heartbroken, because betrayal from strangers feels different. You expect strangers to disappoint you. But betrayal from a parent creates this strange emotional confusion where part of you still wants to protect the person hurting you. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Mom, I ignored it. Then another call, then another. Finally, a text appeared. Please don't overreact. Overreact. My hands started trembling again. An hour later, I received another message. Gary says lawyers make things uglier than they need to be. That was the moment something inside me changed. Not exploded, not shattered, changed. Because suddenly, I realized Gary had been involved long before the sale happened. This was planned. I immediately called an attorney in Seattle named Rebecca Lawson, someone one of our hospital administrators recommended during a real estate dispute years earlier. Rebecca listened quietly while I explained everything. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then she asked one question. Did you authorize the sale? No. Did you electronically sign closing consent? No. Another pause. Then Rebecca said carefully, Ava, based on what you're describing, this could constitute fraud and identity misrepresentation. Hearing those words out loud made everything suddenly real. My own mother. Fraud. I felt physically nauseous. Rebecca instructed me not to contact my mother again until we reviewed all documentation. But life rarely waits politely for emotional preparation. Because that same evening, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Gary. His voice sounded smooth. Too smooth. Ava, I think everyone's emotions are running high. I nearly hung up immediately. Instead, I stayed quiet. You know your mom loves you. I laughed bitterly. Did she love me while forging my signature? Silence. Then he changed tactics instantly. Nobody forged anything. Really? You're being dramatic. There it was, the manipulation. The minimizing, the attempt to make me question reality. I had seen this behavior before in abusive patient relationships. People rewrite facts when truth threatens them. Then Gary said something that made my blood run cold. You don't want to ruin your mother's life over paperwork. Paperwork, not my legal identity, not my financial exposure, not my future. Paperwork, I finally asked the question burning in my head. Where is the money? Another pause, then, we invested some of it already. My entire body went numb. How much? Ava, how much? About 400,000. I stopped breathing for a second. $400,000 gone in less than 48 hours. What did you do with it? It's an opportunity. Opportunity. I later learned that opportunity meant Gary invested huge amounts into a failing luxury RV business his friend owned in Arizona. A business already drowning in debt. A business nobody with financial sense would touch. But at that moment, I did not know details yet. I only knew my life was collapsing in real time. I ended the call. Then I drove to the waterfront in downtown Seattle and sat in my car for nearly 2 hours staring at the rain. Because when your own parent betrays you financially, the damage is deeper than money. It makes you question your instincts, your memories, your worth. I kept replaying childhood moments in my head. My mother crying over bills. My mother thanking me for helping. My mother saying we were a team. Had any of it been real, or had I simply become useful? That question haunted me more than the missing money. 3 days later, Rebecca called with devastating confirmation. The electronic consent came from an IP address in Portland, not Seattle. And the title company had already flagged irregularities internally, which meant someone else noticed, not just me. Rebecca asked if I wanted to pursue legal action. I remember sitting silently for a long time, because despite everything, part of me still wanted to protect my mother. Then Rebecca said something quietly. Ava, protecting someone from consequences sometimes protects the behavior that hurts you. And for the first time in my life, I chose myself. The lawsuit filing happened on a rainy Monday morning. I expected to feel powerful. Instead, I felt sick. Because people imagine boundaries as dramatic moments. But most boundaries actually feel like grief. Rebecca officially filed fraud claims against both my mother and Gary. The title company launched an internal investigation. And suddenly, the situation exploded beyond family secrecy. Relatives started calling. An aunt from California left me a voicemail saying, "You only get one mother." A cousin texted, "Couldn't this stay private?" Nobody asked whether I was okay. Nobody asked how terrifying it felt to discover your legal identity had been used without consent. They only cared that family conflict had become visible. That taught me something important. A lot of people don't actually hate dysfunction. They hate discomfort. And the person exposing the problem often becomes the problem. A week later, my mother finally appeared at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door and barely recognized her. She looked exhausted, mascara smudged, hair messy, face swollen from crying. For one dangerous second, my instincts almost took over. I almost hugged her. Then I remembered the forged signature. "Ava, please," she whispered. I stayed near the doorway. "You can't just destroy my life like this." Destroy, interesting word, because she still spoke like this was happening to her. Not because of her, I asked one question. "Did you sign my name?" She looked down immediately. That answer hurt more than any confession. "Ava, Gary said it was temporary." Temporary, I laughed in disbelief. "You committed fraud because your boyfriend told you to." Her eyes filled instantly. "You don't understand how hard things have been." And there it was, the emotional redirection. Not accountability, not remorse, just explanation. I felt something inside me finally harden. "Mom, you stole my identity." "No, yes. I was going to tell you." "When?" Silence. I looked at her standing there in my apartment doorway, and suddenly I saw something clearly for the first time. My mother did love me, but her version of love depended on access. Access to my money. Access to my emotional labor. Access to my forgiveness. And when those things disappeared, she panicked. That realization broke my heart, because losing someone hurts. But realizing you never had the relationship you thought you had hurts differently. Then she said the sentence that changed everything permanently. "You've always cared more about money than family." I stared at her. After 6 years of financial support, after sacrificing my 20s helping her survive, after paying bills, refinancing homes, skipping vacations, and draining savings, I was the selfish one. Something inside me went completely still. No, I said quietly. I cared more about family than you did. Her face changed instantly. Not sadness, not guilt, anger, real anger. You think you're better than me because you have a career. I shook my head slowly. This was never about careers. Then what is it about? I looked directly at her. Trust. The silence after that felt enormous. Then she started crying harder. But for the first time in my life, her tears did not control me. Because once you finally see manipulation clearly, it becomes impossible to unsee. She begged me to drop the lawsuit. She blamed Gary. She blamed stress. She blamed fear. But she never truly accepted responsibility. And that told me everything. Before leaving, she looked at me with complete devastation and whispered, I don't even recognize you anymore. I almost answered automatically. Then I realized something. She was right. Because the version of me willing to sacrifice everything for approval was finally gone. After she left, I locked the door, leaned against it, and cried harder than I had in years. Not because I regretted my decision, because grieving living people is incredibly painful, especially when they are still trying to convince you that protecting yourself is cruelty. 2 months later, investigators discovered something even worse. Gary had a history, prior fraud accusations, unpaid business debts, civil lawsuits. My mother had ignored every warning sign because she was terrified of being alone. And in the process, she almost destroyed both our lives. The Arizona business failed 3 months after the investment. Completely, bankrupt, gone. Nearly all the remaining house money disappeared with it, and suddenly Gary changed. The charming confidence vanished first, then the expensive dinners, then the promises. Eventually, he vanished too. One morning, my mother woke up in a rented Scottsdale condo and discovered Gary had emptied their joint account and left during the night. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. The irony was almost unbearable. The woman who betrayed me for a man ended up abandoned by him anyway. When Rebecca informed me Gary was being investigated separately for financial misconduct in Arizona, I felt absolutely nothing. Not satisfaction, not revenge, just exhaustion. Because trauma eventually drains emotional extremes out of you. Meanwhile, the legal case continued. The title company settled part of the damages after confirming unauthorized documentation. But recovering the lost funds became nearly impossible. Most of the money was already gone, and despite everything, I still struggled emotionally. That confused people. Coworkers expected rage. Friends expected hatred. Instead, I felt grief. Because my mother's betrayal forced me to accept a painful truth. Love cannot heal someone determined to avoid accountability. No amount of sacrifice fixes that. Around Christmas, my mother called me from an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. Her voice sounded tiny. Ava, I closed my eyes. Yes, she started crying immediately. Not dramatic crying, real crying. I lost everything. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, I should have listened to you. That sentence nearly destroyed me, because it was the first honest thing she had said in months. I asked where she was. A motel. I looked out my apartment window at the Seattle rain falling against streetlights, and despite everything, I still loved her. That is the complicated thing people rarely understand about toxic family relationships. Love does not disappear just because trust does. Sometimes both exist painfully at the same time. She asked if she could come stay with me, and in that moment, my entire future balanced on one decision. Old Ava would have said yes instantly. Old Ava would have sacrificed peace to rescue someone drowning in consequences. But healing changes you. So instead, I said something I never thought I could say. No, the silence afterward hurt physically. Then she whispered, So that's it. I swallowed hard. No, but things cannot go back to how they were. She cried harder. I'm your mother. I know. Ava, please. Tears rolled down my face, but I kept going. I will help you find resources. I will help you contact shelters. I will help you get legal guidance. But you cannot live with me. She sounded shocked, because boundaries feel cruel to people who benefited from your lack of them. Eventually, she hung up. And I sat alone in my apartment, shaking from guilt. But underneath the guilt was something unfamiliar. Peace, not happiness, not victory, peace. Because for the first time in my life, helping someone no longer required destroying myself. That winter changed me permanently. I started therapy. I reduced overtime. I reconnected with friends. I learned how to exist without constantly rescuing other people. And slowly, my life became mine again. A year passed before I heard from my mother again. By then, my life looked completely different. I had moved into a brighter apartment closer to the hospital. I started dating again. I adopted an anxious rescue dog named Oliver who followed me everywhere. And for the first time in adulthood, I no longer woke up every morning feeling emotionally responsible for another grown adult. Healing felt strange at first, quiet, almost unfamiliar. Then one afternoon, a handwritten envelope arrived at my apartment. No return address, but I recognized my mother's handwriting instantly. My hands shook opening it. Inside was a 6-page letter. I sat at my kitchen table reading every word slowly. She wrote about Gary, about shame, about loneliness, about therapy. And then she wrote something that made me cry harder than I expected. You spent your entire life protecting me while I kept asking for more. I stopped reading for a minute. Because all I ever wanted was acknowledgement. Not perfection, not punishment, truth. The letter continued. I convinced myself your success meant you did not need protection too. That sentence shattered something in me, because strong children often become invisible emotionally. People assume competence means invulnerability, but carrying everyone else eventually becomes its own kind of loneliness. At the end of the letter, my mother wrote, I do not expect forgiveness. I only hope someday you remember I loved you, even if I loved you badly. I cried for almost an hour after finishing it, not because everything was magically fixed. It was. Trust rebuilds slowly. Sometimes it never fully returns, but honesty matters. Real accountability matters. And for the first time in years, her words felt real. We did not suddenly become close again. Life is not a movie. Healing after betrayal takes time, sometimes years, but eventually we started speaking occasionally. Carefully, slowly, with boundaries. And oddly enough, those boundaries created the healthiest relationship we had ever had. Not perfect, not easy, just honest. Today, when people ask what the hardest part of that experience was, they expect me to talk about the money. But money was never the deepest loss. The deepest loss was realizing how easily love can become tangled with obligation. And the greatest lesson was understanding this. You can love someone deeply and still refuse to let them destroy your peace. That is not cruelty. That is emotional maturity. For years, I believed being a good daughter meant endless sacrifice. Now I understand something different. Healthy love respects boundaries. Healthy love does not require self-destruction. Healthy love survives honesty. And sometimes the most powerful thing a person can say is one simple word. No, not because they stopped loving someone. Because they finally started loving themselves too. The end.